Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Progressive Bitcoiner. I'm your host, Trey Walsh, and today we have on the show Harry Sudduck. Now, many of you will know who Harry is. He's been on a lot of different Bitcoin shows. He's a Bitcoin miner. He is the Chief Strategy Officer at Grid, a Bitcoin mining company, and his partner at Bitcoin Park, which is an awesome incubator for Bitcoin companies, for Bitcoin events. Really awesome space down in Nashville that many of you all will know about as well. And I wanted to have Harry on to talk about Bitcoin mining and to do a bit of a Bitcoin mining 101 episode. We get into some energy debates as well and FUD that we typically experience from folks on the left about energy, about things like nuclear, how Bitcoin interacts and works with the grid and actually promotes renewable energy. We get into what Bitcoin mining is, why proof of work, and all of those good things for those that just want a quick intro into what Bitcoin mining is. So this was such a great episode that I know you all are going to love, as we focus a lot on Bitcoin mining through the halving that just happened recently. We're going to be spending a lot of time and energy focusing on Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, focusing on the environment and things like that we know you all love to hear, and that's the message that we want to share as well to our environmentalist and progressive friends. So be sure to share this episode widely, and thank you all for your support as always. In the show notes, you can continue supporting us via our Geyser Fund and our Substack. So please be sure to check out those two things, and through our sponsor links as well, through Saz Mining for renewable mining, Zeus for the best Lightning wallet experience, and Bitbox for self-custody. Absolutely love those companies and encourage you all to check out their products in the show notes below. All right, I'll let you get to this awesome conversation with Harry, and we'll see you again next week. Hey, Harry, and welcome to the Progressive Bitcoiner. How are you?
Hey, Trey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you jumping on. We were talking about some jet lag you might be feeling off of a awesome cheat code event in Bedford. So, you know, how was that? How are you feeling coming back fresh from Bedford a few days ago?
A few observations. The first is just, the What Bitcoin Did team, Peter, Danny, Emma, everybody did a really phenomenal job welcoming us to the UK. It is my only trip to England that I've ever taken.
Really? Wow. Okay.
And so my sphere of competence when it comes to England is now just Bedford. That's my assumption. Yeah. That's what all of England is.
Yeah.
Which is good. I think, we got to see the soccer team. I'm not going to say football.
I'm just going to correct you. It's so funny.
We saw them the following day. They did a great job. It was sort of one day of content and then one day of fun, which I think is a really good, refreshing format for the Bitcoin conference circuit that we seem to all find ourselves on. So that was awesome. And then the other thing I just want to highlight is that Peter opened the event by doing a kind of show of hands for the room. And he asked, how many is this for how many people here is this their first Bitcoin event? And over half the room raised their hands.
Wow,
and so
that's awesome.
For over half the people there, this is their first exposure to, in-person Bitcoin experiences. I was at registration the day before, and there were two guys there with me, and for the two of, and they're two friends. They live locally in another part of England. They said this is their first time meeting any other Bitcoiners.
Wow.
So, this is a theme. I've spent a lot of time talking with the HRF team about this, and we obviously at Bitcoin Park talk a lot about this. But for those of us building in-person Bitcoin experiences, there's an enormous opportunity and an enormous burden of responsibility that I think, we all feel as we head into this next cycle of new people getting either excited about Bitcoin for the first time, or people who've maybe been excited about Bitcoin deciding that they want to have some community experiences around their Bitcoin interest. And so, it's going to be a really, really cool, fun, and interesting opportunity to make new friends.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see the diversification of these type of events. I mean, I just got into Bitcoin in 2021. And even since then, whether it's culturally, whether it's diversity of content, different focus areas, groups, it was just kind of the Bitcoin conference was the main one that you would hear about. And nothing but respect for that conference. But it's cool to see this diversity of different events and tailored things and more stories, like you said, of this is someone's first event. And mixing it with, okay, we've got this fun like football game the next day, and then we've got these type of events and breakout groups. And that's only going to do great things for Bitcoin and adoption worldwide is diversifying those things. So couldn't agree more. That it just seems so cool.
Yeah, really incredible trip. I recommend going next year if you can make it. I apologize. Yeah. You're going to have some guest appearances on this from Pepper.
That's great. If you want to see Pepper, you're going to have to jump on the YouTube. If you've got you've got it on the podcasting now to see the adorable pup on the film. I could not do that with my Australian Shepherd. She'd probably destroy the room right now. So she is on the other side of the door.
He's about 9.5 pounds. So it's a good podcast dog.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, before we get too far into the conversation, a bunch of folks listening will know who you are. But for those sprinkling in, as we're talking about some, hopefully newbies, mainstream folks that are like, okay, Bitcoin mining, as the title suggests in this show, what is it? Is it burning our ocean? Burning the planet, boiling our oceans, all of this stuff that we talk about. Can you give a little background to who you are and what you do in this space?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm Harry. I mine Bitcoin. I work for a company called Grid with 2 I's, GRIID. We've been around since middle of 18 and have been mining kind of throughout that life cycle. We recently took the company public on NASDAQ. So we really had just a core thesis. We were all Bitcoiners to begin with. Our founder and CEO, Trey Kelly, not this Trey. There's now 3 Treys in Bitcoin.
I am not a Bitcoin mining CEO.
No. And so we were already Bitcoiners. We'd already been sort of each of us through, 1 or 2 entrepreneurial journeys. The company I'd been an early employee at had been through an acquisition, and then we got reacquired. During kind of that period of time, I'd already fallen down the rabbit hole. I was already obsessed. And the worst thing you can be is an entrepreneur looking for a company to start. Because that's how you end up with lack of product market fit, basically. And, Trey and I kind of got together. We both had this core thesis around low cost energy being an undermonetized asset. And we thought that meant, Bitcoin mining to begin with. We thought we had this incredible structural advantage as an industry, which turned out to be true, maybe faster than even we had thought. And so, we looked all over the world for electricity and ended up back in the great state of Tennessee with the TVA, about an hour outside of Knoxville. And we built our first site. We built our second site. Our third site ended up being co-located with a hydro dam in upstate New York. So we did the behind the meter kind of, very kind of custom contract up there, and then came back to Tennessee, built our third site, and just announced in the last few weeks the plans to build one brand new site and double the capacity at one of the existing. So we're kind of one foot in front of the other. We take a very measured and long-term view towards mining. It's important to be kind of maximally cost conscious above everything else because the competition is very, very hot. And so how do you build a multi-decade business is you continue to double down and triple down on discipline every step of the way. So, didn't have any education or experience background in mining, but definitely learned by doing along the way. And I'm just proud to be able to have carved out, a little corner of Bitcoin land to hang my shingle.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, from the Bitcoin mining company side, I think a lot of miners, and probably you all as well, are super conscious. And I think a lot of miners learned from that previous bull cycle. A lot of over leverage, a lot of understanding the importance of electricity costs, rig costs, loan structures, all of these things that a lot of miners got completely burnt on, because I think a lot in the industry just assumed we'd go a bit higher in 2021, 2022. And that didn't happen for a variety of reasons. People could say FTX, people could say over leverage. A lot of that is true. It doesn't matter. It feels like companies are going in a lot more disciplined this cycle, which I think is very good, obviously, for a number of reasons. But it's also very good for, I think, perception of a lot of things. I think a lot of miners have gotten more strict on electricity costs and agreements on talking about renewable energy, on whether it's whether it's folks actually trading and investing in these companies and having them in retirement portfolios. It seems like a maturing of the industry that is really great. And I just commend most, if not virtually all miners I've seen, whether it's public and private, taking it seriously. And I feel like taking the responsibility of securing the network seriously. Like it's really hard to talk about the mining industry just from, yes, profits, yes, companies, but also most miners are really focused, and you all as well, from the sense I get, on, we're securing this monetary revolution. Like we are building for the future, the next, several decades, centuries of what Bitcoin is. And that's really cool. So can you talk about that from your perspective, what that's like? Obviously there's the business details, but what it's like being at the front of all of this, 15 years into this monetary revolution.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you just said. I think, the story of mining over the last, and I think the first 5 years are kind of irrelevant, relative to the business models that we see today. It was just laptops and maybe some GPU stuff that was out there. I draw a demarcation point in our history around 2015-16 with the release of the S9. And that was the first time there was a hardware form factor that was robust enough to go to a more professional scale. And so I think you see, the unsung story of kind of 2016 to 2020 maybe is just how incredible the Chinese entrepreneurs were who ran mining farms over there. They are some of the most incredible capitalists in the world. And I just have a tremendous amount of admiration and respect for what they were able to do, for the network during that period of time. And, that kind of takes us to the next demarcation point, which is the Chinese mining ban, where China government, opted to say that this is an industry that doesn't have a home here. And we really saw America and Eastern Europe to some degree, but really it was the great rise of the American mining farm. And that was a huge industrialization and professionalization of the industry, where, in China during those earlier years, you were seeing a huge amount of seasonal rotation between the wet season and the dry season. And, a huge amount of kind of, held together with duct tape kind of operation, big chicken coop kind of setups for those mines. They worked, which is incredible. But I think, the building standards and the runtime standards that they were operating under, weren't nearly as high quality as sort of their American counterparts built out, call it between 2020 and 2023 to present. And so there was like a third phase of things, which I think has kind of just happened in maybe the last 18 months, which is that, there's a re-diversification globally now around where hash is moving. You see this, from the largest players, down to some of the smaller, more creative opportunities. You've got Bitfarms and Marathon mining in Paraguay, and you've got, other, Marathon's also in the UAE and Middle East. You've got Bitdeer in Bhutan and Norway and elsewhere. And so you're seeing some of these very large players saying, okay, the American footprint is awesome, but I need more, or I need more, more diversified, jurisdictional provenance around my revenues. And then you start to see some of the alternative business models, whether it's the gridless computes, or some of the flared gas mitigation solutions that are out there now that are operating. Yeah, they're in the Permian Basin, but they're also in Argentina and some of these other gas-rich environments. So I think that there's sort of these three phases where it was, China, America, diversified. Those have come along with significant professionalization as well. Where, you've got multi-billion-dollar companies out there, running mining operations at this point. You've got the mega campuses, approaching a gigawatt on a single plot of land, all the way down to, the very small scale bootstrapped hydro operations as well. And so you're seeing an extension of the business model, bringing more viable mining businesses into the mainstream. But you're also seeing a higher quality of accounting, higher quality public company disclosures. You're seeing a lower cost of capital on the formation side. All of this is just the continued kind of steady march out of the Wild West and into the professionalization phase for mining. And I think that's all, largely to the positive, because at the end of the day, you said it exactly right, which is that we do have an enormous responsibility, which is, our job is to contribute, proof of work to this network that separates money from state and re-empowers the productive class. And if we're going to take that responsibility seriously, our businesses need to look serious. And now they finally do.
Yeah, I think that was a great intro to the business landscape, and we'll spend a lot of time starting now on some fundamental stuff, giving our audience, new listeners, even veteran listeners. I think, or veterans of Bitcoin. I find it really helpful every once in a while, even for people that feel like they've read everything on Bitcoin mining, studied research. You hear things explained. Maybe you would explain something in a way different than Troy and Margot, who I've had on, or Daniel Baden, or just different metaphors, different ways of thinking about it, because this is it's still an alien, man. It's like trying to understand this and get our heads around it. I still find it's very, very simple in one regard, but it's also the most complex specimen on the planet is Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. So for this discussion, I want to start with a leading, difficult, and vague question, which is, what is Bitcoin mining? If someone comes up to you, you're walking down the street past Bitcoin Park, and someone's like, "Oh, Bitcoin Park, oh, mining. What is Bitcoin mining? What do you even do? How does that work? How do you start to explain that to someone if they ask, what is Bitcoin mining?"
Yeah, I think that, what Bitcoin mining is fundamentally is the race to add the next block to the network. And, if you think about what is Bitcoin, right? It's a database, and it's a special database. So typically databases have 4 key functions. The first is write. So you write a new line into the database. 2 is read. You query the database for some piece of information. 3 is edit. So you edit an existing line within the database. And 4 is delete. You delete a line from the database. And Bitcoin is special because it only does the first 2, right? It takes away the ability to edit, and it takes away the ability to delete. And that's the special sauce in all of Bitcoin, is that it's a very, very special database that you as a user of Bitcoin have, ultimate confidence that only those first 2 functions are going to work. And so what miners do is basically we add, we perform the write function to the database, and we do so in a way that guarantees that we didn't edit and we didn't delete. And in exchange for that new line item, that new entry, we get paid by the network based on new coin issuance. And we also collect the fees that everybody who paid to be part of that new line item paid us and bid to have their transaction included in the new line item that gets added. And so if you want to get the revenue, you got to be first. And so you want to solve the puzzle that lets you add the new line the fastest. And so that's why you see this sort of escalatory environment around hash rate to plug in more machines to try to be first. So one way to be first is you can get machines that do it better. And the other way to be first is you can have more machines on a gross basis. And you see miners doing both by A, upgrading their fleet to more efficient units, and B, expanding their footprint, which, basically every miner is in the process of doing, every single day. So, what is Bitcoin mining? It's about winning the race to add a new line item.
Yeah, I love that. I love that explanation. I think that makes a lot of sense. When thinking about Bitcoin mining, whether a lot of our audience are either Bitcoiners or are here to support the message of Bitcoin being actually kind of good for the climate, good for environmentalism in a lot of regards, or some people trickling in who have only heard that Bitcoin is really bad for the environment. It uses too much electricity. Why is it using all this data to begin with, all this energy and electricity for compute? Why can't it just do proof of stake? Why can't it do a different mechanism? So I want to get into, we've touched on it a bit in this pod before, but why proof of work? Why is it so important to use all of this electricity that these computers are using? So again, when people think Bitcoin mining, really it's data farming. It's a Bitcoin data farm. People visualize. I've got all sorts of mixed feelings about the mining narrative, but it is what it is. It's stuck with us for over a decade at this point. So why proof of work? Why is that so important to Bitcoin?
Yeah. So I think, we're gonna challenge our listeners and say we're gonna have to talk about two concepts. One of them is called endogeneity. The other is called exogeneity. Endogeneity has to do with everything within the system, and exogeneity has to do with everything outside the system. And so what proof of work does so brilliantly is it creates the membrane in between Bitcoin inside the system and Bitcoin outside the system. And it forges that membrane in exactly the right amount of porousness such that the two attributes of the database that you don't want to have are not possible. And so when you think about what Satoshi's key innovation really was, is it's the marriage between proof of work and the difficulty adjustment. And so you've got a self-referential system that allows for the issuance of new coins on schedule. We're right about to hit the halving. So every 4 years, every 210,000 blocks, the supply schedule, the issuance rate of Bitcoin gets cut in half. And so for the first epoch, that meant 50 Bitcoin per block were minted. And, to the beauty of the numerology, that also meant that 50% of total Bitcoin was issued in those first 210,000 blocks. The second was 25, cut in half. 25% of the total supply was issued during that period. Then 12.5 Bitcoin per block, 12.5% of the total supply were issued. And the reason that those schedules were on time, right? So if we just added more miners to the network and had faster and faster blocks, we would pull the supply schedule forward in time. What Satoshi did was said, okay, so every 210,000 blocks, we're going to cut the supply in half. Every 2016 blocks, we're going to look back and we're going to make it harder to find a block or easier based on how quickly the blocks came. And that self-referential, that endogeneic property to Bitcoin's supply schedule meant that it was going to take a long time in order to release these coins into the world. So that's the endogenous part of Bitcoin, is the difficulty adjustment. The exogenous relationship between Bitcoin and the world is that if you want to plug in more compute, you have to buy more electricity, because the only way to produce those computations is to demonstrate the usage of that electricity, because the algorithm that we're all working against, the SHA-256 encryption, is difficult on a per joule basis to produce. To produce a potential block, we have to prove that we consumed the electricity. So the exogenous relationship between Bitcoin and the world is forged with every single proposed new block share that the miners are working on. And so there is an endogenous relationship to the difficulty adjustment and an exogenous relationship to the algorithm and the electrons. And that means that to co-opt the production of new blocks in Bitcoin land is incredibly, incredibly difficult. So why does the database not edit or delete? It's because the endogenous relationship gets rid of people trying to manipulate the supply schedule, and the electron requirement gets rid of people who are trying to spoof it or fake it. Why don't I have 10 million Twitter followers? Is because there's lots of software on Twitter that tries to keep bots from DDoSing my followers. The electrons keep people from DDoSing new blocks onto the Bitcoin network. And so you got this forced behavior of the system that is outside of the control of any group. So that's all why proof of work, that's what proof of work is and does. Why is that different from proof of stake, and why is that better? Because proof of stake doesn't have the relationship to the outside world. If I've got a pre-mine coin and I've got a proof of stake system, I just put myself in the emperor's chair because I gave myself the coins and I gave myself a consensus mechanism that says the person with the coins has the power. In Bitcoin, you have no more control over the network, whether you have one coin or a million coins. And that's because proof of work essentially firewalls the performance of the network away from ownership of the asset.
Yeah, and that's what's brilliant about it. And you saying, kind of giving a warning to the listener, saying this really is entirely different than any of us have experienced the world before. Almost any system of power. And obviously, on this podcast, what we try to wrestle with a lot is power dynamics, like the powerful few versus the powerless many, and how Bitcoin is hopefully correcting that over time. Now, I'll be the first one to say, I don't think Bitcoin fixes wealth inequality in a moment, or, there's still people that can get fabulously wealthy off of Bitcoin, things like that. But the important thing,
and they have.
Yes. The thing that you mentioned, though, that's really important is it doesn't change the structure and dynamic, the system of Bitcoin, which currently the wealthy also have control and manipulation power of the system. That's the difference here.
Two things to add there. One is that wealth inequality is good, right? Fundamentally, if I produce a good or a service that everybody thinks is more valuable than what somebody else produces, shouldn't I get the money for selling it?
Sure.
Isn't that what a market does? Is it rewards quality, right? And if we live in a world where there's a concept of equity, right, where equity ownership in a business is the right to the future cash flows of said business, and that business differentiates itself over a long period of time, the equity holders of that business should get rich because that business delivered outsized cash flow to those holders of those shares. I think that wealth inequality is fundamentally a good thing, because it means that the market is rewarding a superior good or service relative to an inferior good or service. The problem is that we have a system where it's not just about whether or not the good or the service is better or worse. It's whether or not you have a more adjacent position to maybe the money printer, or maybe the ivory tower, or maybe some other social construct that creates a barrier and a preferential treatment for a certain good or service, irrespective of its quality. And that's the problem. And that's really what Bitcoin is here to solve: mobility, not inequality. And so what should happen if we have a better monetary system and a better monetary tool is that the quality of goods or services should be more accurately rewarded or punished, rather than, oh, hey, I made a better political donation than you did, so therefore I'm going to win the government contract, and therefore I'm going to be rich for 1,000 years. That's the problem, is that right now there's such distortion in the measurement of goods and services on a qualitative basis that wealth is no longer an indication of productivity. It's an indication of adjacency to power.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. And I think the progressive realm that I come from, because again, people hear that word, it means a million different things. There's far left connotations of it. There's middle of the road connotations of it. We are, however, and I am speaking from a capitalist system. So it's not a communist system or socialist system we're talking about in terms of what this system that we're talking about. So some folks might disagree there off the bat, and that's fine. What I'm talking about, what were you going to say, Harry?
I'm comfortable. I'm very comfortable being wrong, and B, I'm comfortable hearing, opinions that don't, map directly into my worldview at all. I just think that if we're going to have, an accurate treatment of the world around us, we need to have fair rules. And to me, I have no better tool to introduce a fair playing field than Bitcoin, to be able to kind of hash out the other ideas on the merits.
This episode of The Progressive Bitcoiner is brought to you by Zeus. Zeus is a self-custodial Bitcoin wallet for Android and iOS. The app features a built-in Lightning node that allows you to take full control of how you make payments on-chain and on Lightning. You can easily onboard to the Lightning network and let Zeus's Lightning service provider, Olympus, do all the heavy lifting for you. Or you can get more hands-on and curate your own Lightning channels with whoever you transact with most. Zeus has best-in-class privacy and allows you to have great peace of mind when sending and receiving Lightning payments. Not only does the Zeus team not want to know how you're using your money, but they're building things in a way that they can't know. There's also a first of its kind Lightning address that will allow you to receive payments 24/7 to your mobile wallet self-custodially. This is a great solution for a range of people. For those who just want to have the technical ability to set up their own infrastructure, to nomads and dissidents that need to accept donations on the move. Other Lightning wallets don't give the users this level of control. In fact, many of them operate more like bank accounts that can be revoked and ultimately lead to you losing your money. With Zeus, you're in full control of your private keys and therefore can start to take full control of your financial destiny. Save 5% on LSP fees using code TPB in the access code under LSP settings. To learn more and to learn where to download, head to ZeusLN.com. Yeah, and that's exactly where I come from. And I think, it's kind of dropping a good pin in this conversation right now, because I think one of the fun things about doing this podcast that always happens, I have people coming in from the right that are like, oh my gosh, and they listen to a few episodes and they're like, huh, okay. And then you have some people from the left coming in and saying, oh my gosh, what's going on? And just thinking about, and we've had a growing number of listeners that will go out and listen because they want to challenge their presuppositions of the world or of Bitcoin or whatever. And that's one of the reasons I want to do this. I don't want an echo chamber of guests. I don't want an echo chamber of listeners. I'm constantly on air thinking through my views. That is a rich and healthy thing. It's very, excuse the corniness, it's a very American thing. And I think also, to your point, what we're talking about is meritocracy, which is a deeply progressive ideal in the sense that there's a lot of folks in America that haven't been given the benefit of actually achieving and getting to their full potential that their merit and their product deserves because of this rigged system. And that is one thing that I think Bitcoin does a lot. And I think we'll be even more impressed with in the decades to come, with folks that are holding Bitcoin, using Bitcoin, starting businesses that accept Bitcoin, all of these things that'll do great for the immigrant entrepreneur in America, for the miners, for the folks that get jobs because of miners, for folks that save it in their retirement funds and their pensions. There's so many things that Bitcoin will do for that. But again, if people, because somebody might hear and clip that context of wealth inequality is good. But again, taking that term and exploring why we're saying that, I think it makes a lot of sense. And it's an ideal that is very, forget your ideologies. It's an ideal that's very American, very democratic, very promoting of individual communities. And that is what Bitcoin is. I think that is if CK will get mad at me because we just said Bitcoin doesn't have a central ethos. But if we will, that is a core ethos of Bitcoin, is meritocracy and everyone plays by the same rules. And that I think is good,
Exactly.
a good foundation for society, in my opinion.
And, to me, it's like I want to encourage, the audience to hear the words wealth inequality and think instead about economic mobility, right? The existence of wealth inequality means that you have the opportunity to achieve economic mobility, right? That's the whole game is am I going to leave my children more opportunity than I grew up with? Are my children likely to leave their children more opportunity than they grew up with? And do I think that that's higher? Do I think that that's more highly achievable in Bitcoin world? Or do I think that that's more highly achievable in today's world? And I lean, entirely to the former.
Yeah, completely. And I think, if I had a chart visual right now, what we saw, obviously we can go into all this stuff about gold standard and all of this, right? The American dream, the view and reality of children having more wealth than their parents post our great wars, post World War I, World War II, kept going up for several decades, right? This generation, our millennial generation, is one of the first where we've seen it diverge pretty poorly, where our parents, for many millennials, it's a position where our parents will have much more wealth than we typically would. That's why this point in history, like Bitcoin just popping out of this sucking in everything into this black hole or popping out, however you want to view it, is the opportunity for us to continue on that trajectory because the system is failing. The state is failing in terms of these, opportunities, these rigged systems, the fiat system. Bitcoin is that opportunity to continue that American tradition, to continue that evolution. And it's great globally, right? But we're talking so much about US infrastructure and audience, things like that. This is globally beneficial, obviously. And we talk about that a lot on this show. But that's something that I want people to understand. This is the opportunity and the fix, because one of the reasons I was so convicted to continue down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and even do the show is because I have so many progressive and left leaning friends that are so heartbroken and angry and depressed. I think especially post like Bernie's run in 2016, right? Just slowly seeing and how many decades can you hear politicians saying this is the answer? Nothing's getting better, right? So for me, it was like I already knew the system was broken, so it was a bit easier for me to get into Bitcoin. But some others, I'm trying to talk with friends and be like, listen, this is a really great tool and an answer. It's not a universal and perfect answer, but it's something, right? And I think this has got something that nothing else has. So give it a shot, learn about it. Cause like so far, we've got no good answers for climate, no good answers for like savings, no good answers for inflation. Well, Bitcoin has a lot of these so far. So I've just been pumped and could not stop talking about it since discovering that, to be honest.
Totally. It just grabs you, right? It's like a, you've ever done, I love puzzles. And so if you're like 995 pieces into a 1,000-piece puzzle and you look at the box and it's empty, it's like the worst, right? But when you just and then you look on the floor and there's like 5 more pieces and you put them right in and you're done. This Bitcoin is those last 5 pieces on the floor that we're waiting for, right? We've got incredible, communities all over the planet. We've got incredible, quality of life, healthcare, and all, lots of things that, 100 years ago, nobody would have ever believed we have. And now we've got that last piece that we're missing.
Yeah. What's so funny, I was just talking to my wife this morning about, because every now and again, I'll just be sitting, eating breakfast, whatever. And then I go on a 10-minute rant. Any Bitcoiner probably does this with their spouse. And it's just, we're insufferable. And doing this thing where I'm like, I was literally saying that. I'm like, okay, yeah, surgeries are a bit better. We've got anesthesia. We've got great healthcare benefits, all this stuff. But it's so hard to talk about the problems of today because in many regards, we have more wealth than ever. We have a more comfortable living standard and higher living standard for the most part in history, right? So it's really hard to talk about how life is in some ways worse than ever as well, or the trajectory of where we're headed, or mental health, or obviously the cost of a home compared to your wages, compared to the 60s and early 70s. Those are the things we're on about, but it's really hard to communicate that to people because the levers of power are getting much more sneaky in communication about these things. That's what makes this so hard. So you're right. So many other things are much better in our world that having those last pieces, I love that metaphor, is like, wow, now we can really, get on this rocket ship. Not not to the moon in terms of price of Bitcoin, yes, that, but just in terms of society. And I view it as like the proper human evolution with Bitcoin. That's what I feel like I've seen, and a lot of us have seen. So we're slowly trying not to sound too psychopathic, so we can, show people, hey, I think this is onto something, and this is the last few puzzle pieces here.
And it's like the silly little tells, where like if you go to a Bitcoin event, everybody has kids or wants kids because they're hopeful, right? If you just say, "Are you excited to have kids?" They all say yes because they're excited about the future and they feel hopeful and optimistic. And to me, that's like a beautiful expression of those feelings, which is I'm really excited to show the next generation about what I've learned and why we're on a path to prosperity or continued prosperity. But you go to, lots of other environments and, there's a large ethos of, well, we shouldn't have kids. And so I think like that's one of those really easy kind of forks in the road where, regardless of your politics, I think Bitcoin people are just excited about the future. And until people maybe find Bitcoin, it feels like that's an unachievable reality, which is tremendously motivating to me.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. One of my first pretty brief article I wrote in Bitcoin Magazine a couple of years ago. At this point, the title was I'm remembering right. There was a couple of different titles we were throwing around, but "Hope for a Generation Found Hopeless," and it was this concept of I was really concerned. I've done a lot of young adult programming, workforce development, youth programs for inner city youth in my nonprofit experience. And I was getting angry that our world, the way we're talking about things, the way that we're showing the future to these young people is just a giving up, or just a it's in to be depressed, it's in to talk about, and depression is real. Let me put that this way. It's a real concern and a real crisis. But I'm saying folks that are only focused on the negativity of whether it's climate, negativity of financial mobility, all of these things around the world. So I was like, we need something for folks to, that's call to action. And for me, discovering Bitcoin was that call to action. And it's like, wow, Bitcoin is, not to be too corny again, but Bitcoin is hope for this generation. It's hope for everyone. But I'm really still hoping and waiting for the younger generation to climb into it more. And there is more and more of that. I think Ella Huff is a great example. There's so many others that that are focusing on Bitcoin for Gen Z, to give them hope for something, because that's such a beautiful metaphor you said. Like, Bitcoiners are hopeful, but we've got reason to be. There's a lot of things we're already seeing with Bitcoin in a hopeless landscape. And I've said this on this show before too, in Broken Money by Lynn Alden. She had said something in the book saying, like, if we didn't have Bitcoin, I'm not sure what solution there is in terms of the train wreck that is global deficits, the train wreck that is these monetary systems, right? Like, kind of like, thank God for Bitcoin, because right now we don't have another good solution. Like, it seems like you and I are pretty open. A lot of Bitcoiners, I think, are pretty open about, like, listen, things are pretty messed up. Let's find solutions. But hey, Bitcoin is a good solution and tool here.
Totally. I think that's all true. I agree with all of that. I think that foundational thinking of, openness, but high conviction, I don't know if technocrat is the right word to describe what I mean, but it's this, this like foundational idea that we're going to have to apply hard thinking and hard choices to the world around us in order to achieve a more prosperous future. And it will not be easy. There will be winners and losers from any transition from the current system to a future system. That's certainly the case. And so our job is to be compassionate and inclusive as we go through that, but without compromising.
Yeah, 100%. And I think Troy Cross had said this to me recently. I forget who had. I'm sure he feels the sentiment, but there's more educational content coming out. There's more positive environmental resources for climate scientists, for environmental fudsters on Bitcoin mining. So in one regard, that message of inclusivity and trying to teach and show people is really important. And I'm talking everyday average people, like the audience we're trying to target through this podcast. But some in positions of power, right? The Greenpeaces, the mainstream medias that continue their FUD battles against Bitcoin. It's getting increasingly harder and harder to be patient with these people, because at this point, it's not 2018. You know what I mean? Like a lot more data is coming out, voluntary data from miners, good hard research on climate, methane emissions, carbon, all of these different things is for mining, not to mention all the other human rights use cases, these things. So for folks in those positions to come out with these reports continuously, it's been nice to see Bitcoiners take the gloves off the past couple of years and be like, all right, we've been patient enough. We're going on offense because this is really important. And you are not using good data, good evidence. It's not reputable. There's dirty money involved with most of this. Enough is enough. And going on offense has been really, really great for that, because so again, that high conviction, being open to the average person that's been misled by some of these, reports on environmental impacts of Bitcoin mining, whatever the case may be, allowing those people to hear these things, but then going after those folks. And I mean, Daniel Batten's just been one of the greatest at this, right? Former Greenpeace guy himself, environmentalist. And it's like, no, cut the bullshit. Like, this is too important. We're going to set the record straight. That's been so beautiful to see from the community.
Yeah, I think my deepest mask off point was really around the whole nuclear issue,
Mm.
which for me has been like the most disgusting display of degrowth, anti-human, in the name of progress, behavior that I've ever seen. Right, Germany shut off their nuclear reactors. They doubled their nameplate capacity, and they're delivering less megawatt hours to their population than ever before. So they doubled the nameplate, but because wind and solar does not operate as reliably as nuclear, they essentially now just have to import endless coal and gas. I think there was a report that said that the emission load pre and post nuclear shutdown is 200 times greater than estimated.
Yeah, I mean, it's believable.
And so to me, there is a irreconcilable position, particularly on the environmental progressive left, which is I'm, pro climate and anti nuclear. Those people are liars and charlatans.
I fully agree.
Or they're fundamentally misinformed and misled.
Yep.
That is an irreconcilable position. The fact that we haven't been building a nuclear fleet every single year for the last 30 years is a travesty. And the fact that we are shutting down actively operating zero carbon emission functional nuclear plants with decades left on their useful life is a crime against the planet and a crime against our population.
Yeah, I agree. And I know you've been talking about nuclear for a long time. And I think most people that are progressives or environmentalists that come into Bitcoin are right there with you on energy demands. Because I think I didn't know anything about energy before getting into Bitcoin. That was one of the coolest things to learn about was energy. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay. So yeah, we talk about it all the time on this show. Like we have the name the progressive Bitcoiner. It's a bit of marketing. It's where some of my value sets come from and others. It's a way to appeal to folks. But coming in, there is a way that Bitcoin changes those views, right? And not all progressives would say, nuclear is bad, but that's one position, one of many that I fully disagree on of hardline leftists. And what I'm saying is you guys have not come up with solutions. It's crazy.
Trey, you're putting the progress back in progressive.
I would think so. Yeah.
Right. This is the whole thing is that it's some of the greatest marketing on the left is calling yourselves progressives and liberals because progress and liberalism are phenomenal ideals. Let's just hold true to them.
Yeah, completely. And I think the nuclear battle, and this is why, there's some folks, and I'm not going to lie, there has been some of us in Bitcoin have been able to connect with some of the Greenpeace folks offline. They wouldn't do it on this show. They wouldn't dare. But really good conversations with some folks that have run some of their campaigns. I've had great conversations with some folks, and you'll notice they quietly leave, or all of a sudden, like, have you heard as much about change the code? No, you haven't. You've heard more about clean up Bitcoin. So that's even evolved because they haven't had an audience. They know they're losing that. So there's a lot of these narratives that slowly people are shifting. Slowly people are pulling back from this militance against certain things like that. And again, I don't see a future, especially with the energy demands of the society that all of us are picturing, a more futuristic society that's better for everyone, not a dystopian, but just like a better world for everyone that's very, 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 again, regardless of ideology, it's very energy intensive. I don't see that future without nuclear, period. And that is carbon free. So the fact that some people would advocate for that, I agree. I'm just as angry about all of these things. And again, are we here for solutions that will actually help the planet and help people, or ideology? Well, I gave up on the ideology a long time ago. I've said it many times before. I'm a registered independent. I am not, we won't, sponsor or support a specific political candidate on this show. Sure, we'll talk to political candidates, whatever. But we're here for humanity, to talk about Bitcoin being good for humanity, Bitcoin being good for humanity in terms of the environment and changing renewable energy structures. And so that's why I think our message we can disagree on some of the fine-tuned things in terms of different ideologies. Someone is on the spectrum. Good. That's great. Exactly.
That means
you agree.
Fun.
Some people would really disagree with me on that.
No, we're sharpening. That's but like this is the beautiful point of, why is our First Amendment first, right?
Yeah.
It's because it's because the words that you say become the thoughts you can have. And if you do not have freedom of speech, you do not have freedom of thought. And therefore, you don't get to improve. Because if I can't think better tomorrow than I did today, then I've lost. It's the progress is perfection in that way. And I think, the other thing I want to say is that it's not just about the energy. It's about the places where the mining happened and what does the energy mean to those communities. There are huge swaths of America, not even to mention all over the world, that just don't have enough density of electricity to deliver a higher quality of life. That can mean as fundamental, a change as I was just with Eric Hersman last week. And he's like, if we didn't have LED lights at night in some of these villages that he's putting in hydroelectric, they're standing over paraffin lamps. Kids standing over paraffin lamps late at night to do their homework immediately are going to have worse health outcomes than if they just have LED lights instead. Their clinic can't stay open at night because they, imagine trying to deliver a baby by cell phone flashlight. That's what they were doing before they had these LED lights. So the groundbreaking human good that electricity delivers is irrefutable. And I think that, the argument about how do you generate that electricity, to me, is derivative of the first fundamental idea, which is that electricity on a per capita basis delivers higher quality of life. Full stop.
Yeah. And I think it doesn't take much for folks to learn a little bit about this stuff and how good it is for humanity to, in my opinion, drop some of these ideological positions, right? Now, it doesn't mean drop things entirely. It doesn't mean like, okay, let's our for folks on the left, our regard for climate change and emissions and all of this goes away overnight. It's not about that. Also learning that a lot of this stranded energy actually is renewable energy, a whole other story. But again, people have to learn the realities of these things in a world that is overly in a nation in a world that is overly politicized on everything. And I've been personally very disgusted with it. Like for a long time, I've seen the clown show that the right has produced. Like for me, it was about like warmongering. A lot of us, coming out of 9/11 and all of this stuff, a lot of things for no reason, like counting millions and millions of lives lost, all this stuff. So a lot of progressives and folks on the left have seen that from the right, but then to see your own party do it on other things or your own group of people, whatever, it called into question, what do I identify myself with at this point? All of these things. And I think most people coming into Bitcoin, we're building a parallel system, a different world. It's an evolving world. So you're not going to be fully comfortable in any of these camps. That's kind of the point. We're building something different here. So for folks to learn about just some of that little tidbit of what you said, not enough people have even taken the time to explore that, which is needed.
Yeah. And I think that, the other piece that Bitcoin mining has delivered is a business model that has total geographical diverse capability. So, I'll tell you the brief anecdote of us building our first mining facility. We went to, it's in Tennessee. It's about an hour outside of Knoxville. It's the furthest point on the Knoxville Utility Board system. They're never getting Ford to build a manufacturing plant there. They're never getting a Facebook data center. There's no accessible waterway. There's no interstate highway. The hospitals and schools can't support another 700 employees to move there, but they have the electricity. And so we look at that and say, great, we'd rather be there than somewhere that's more densely populated because our dollar of revenue for the energy does a lot more good. Every dollar of property tax and sales tax does a lot more good there. We're not paying any more or less to be there versus to be somewhere, more urban or more central. And the Bitcoin network is completely revenue indiscriminate about where you compute your hashes. So, the equalizer that Bitcoin delivers is that it's complete revenue equality. Whether you produce hash rate in sub-Saharan Africa, in, northern Mongolia, or Knoxville, Tennessee, those hashes are valued by the Bitcoin network 100% equally. And so that means that there's an equality of revenue access, which means all our job as entrepreneurs is to build the best business to deliver that value in whatever way we possibly can. And so it opens the door to so many incredible people who want to work on this and to be creative and to be industrious. And it makes this opportunity to generate Bitcoin revenue available to the entire planet all at once.
Yeah, there's definitely a purity to the mining industry. Whether you're learning about it as an investor, or whether you're learning about it as someone who wants to be a part of it, or just know about it, because you're looking for the cheapest energy possible. You're looking for, it's all about cost efficiency. And that's one of the biggest things. And so people are, I think what Troy uses the dung beetle example, just you're scouring the earth for the cheapest and oftentimes renewable energy in these contexts. And the second and third order effects from this is pretty brilliant. But you brought up one point that it was one of the questions on my list that people would be like, why'd you guys go on a tangent so much? I'm like, well, it just happened. It was important for the conversation. But for people to know, because it's kind of complicated at first. I mean, there's obviously a ton of different details that you all at Grid will know very well. But a lot of folks in the news will talk about, there's kind of two sides. Some people will really talk against this type of approach, and some people will be really for it. But there's a lot of FUD about grid integration and what things that have happened, like ERCOT with the grid. A lot of misinformation about what actually happens there. Like, oh, the miners are taking all of the electricity and people aren't able to use it. So can you give our audience a little tidbit of what it's like to connect to the grid, why it's important that Bitcoin is that flexible load, and what that means? Because I think some people have explored it more, find it pretty cool, but I think in general it can be kind of confusing to see how does Bitcoin help balance the grid? Because you hear that a lot, but I think for people to know what that means would be really important.
Yeah, it's important to ground ourselves in what is a grid and how does it work. So any electric system kind of has three parts. The first is the generation. So big turbine spins, there's a magnet, electrons are created. Then there's transmission. So you move those electrons over a long distance. And then there's delivery. So how does that electron guarantee that when you flip your light switch, it works? And so those are the three phases of any electric system. The other thing that's important to know is that when you design one of these systems, you have to design it for the most usage, not the average usage. And so by fundamental engineering nature, you have to overbuild your grid relative to day-to-day use to be able to support the coldest days of winter, the hottest days of summer, when things go wrong, so there's a margin of error baked in. And so, depending on the grid that you're living in, that more stressed period, there's 8,760 hours a year. The grid is under pressure somewhere between 10 hours and 1,000 hours a year from those higher periods of demand. And it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and generation type to generation type. But think of it as, somewhere between 0.1% and 10% of the time. That means that when Bitcoin miners come in and use electricity, they have zero impact on the overall system 90% of the time. They have some modest amount of impact, maybe 9% of the time. And they have a lot of opportunity to influence the system between 0.1 and 1% of the time. And so when you talk about the dynamic nature and the flexible load that Bitcoin miners represent, basically our job is to sign contracts that guarantee us the 90. We can negotiate about the 9 and we'll give you back the 1. Because the grid is really only under real heavy stress, maybe 1% of the time. So it's really about the types of contracts that you sign and the types of programs that your region has in place. So in Tennessee, there's a big interruptible program that they work with you on, where they'll basically say, we'll give you back money on every bill over the course of the year, and we reserve the right to ask you to turn off some small percentage of the time. And every grid as they get more advanced, develop more sophisticated versions of that idea. And Texas is probably the furthest along in terms of that sophistication. But that's sort of fundamentally why Bitcoin doesn't impact day-to-day life whatsoever on an electric system. And on some small percentage of the time, they're able to solve their role within the system contractually. I think that, Bitcoin gets a lot of credit for being like new technology and innovation in money, innovation in tech. And that's all true. But there's also on the mining side, a huge undertold story around contractual innovation and consumption innovation, where, if you called Alcoa or Ford or some of these other, very large users of electricity, where they have operations, they, from an engineering perspective, can't shut off flexibly. Maybe they've got liquid aluminum in the pot lines that if you turn off the electricity, that's going to harden. There's no going back. You got to rebuild stuff, or their machinery would suffer if you're at an auto plant. There's all of these sort of other considerations as to why they wouldn't want to shut off. Bitcoin miners are happy to shut off within the context of an agreement like that. And so we have sort of this trifecta, which is we're able to locate anywhere. We're able to shut off an enormous amount of power on a very, very rapid response time basis. And we're able to pack a lot of power into a small footprint. And so we're not, if you look at solar, right, you're looking at, I don't know, maybe like 1 megawatt every 5 acres is roughly the math. So you have a huge amount of ground cover. We put 10 megawatts in 1 acre. And so we're 50 times denser than solar production. And so we don't have to consume a lot of land in a beautiful rural place. That land gets allocated to farmers or tourism or whatever else. So we're able to drive an enormous amount of productivity into a very small footprint. And we're not impairing the grid the vast majority of the time. And the times when the grid needs that power back, there's programs to incentivize and guarantee that we're going to perform and give that power back to them.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Bitbox. Now, Bitbox is a hardware wallet that's open source, incredibly secure and easy to use, and it's what I'm using to safely secure my Bitcoin in cold storage. Now, I know self-custodying Bitcoin can really be intimidating, but Bitbox is designed for ease of use without compromising on security. It's USB-C compatible and allows you to easily back up and restore your private keys with a micro SD card, which is really cool. Now, you can purchase the Bitbox using the promo code TPB at the link found in the show notes for 5% off your purchase. And I really want to thank Bitbox for their support of the podcast, and I'm really excited about this new partnership. All right, I'll let you get back to the episode now. Yeah, I think that's a really great example there. And there's two other things I really want to make sure to go over with you in this episode in particular. I mean, we could do a whole, PBS style series on all of this. And, super appreciate your time. I think people love hearing from you on all of this stuff. But I want to talk about community, and I want to talk more about specifically how Bitcoin can incentivize in these market ways, renewable expansion, methane capture, these type of things that would really pique environmentalists who are open to it, their interest. But first off, on the community basis, because you were talking about, footprint, things like that. That's also been a lot of media coverage about some. First of all, I want to do two things. I want to say there's Bitcoin, the open source protocol, the asset, the whatever it is, and there's companies that mine Bitcoin, that sell Bitcoin products. The Bitcoin industry, Bitcoin companies, is not Bitcoin. So there could be examples where a Bitcoin company does something that's not great. That does not mean, and that does not mean that Bitcoin is a neutral global software. So I want to make that distinction first. Secondly, I do, however, think the industry has been under unfair attack and criticism in a variety of ways that we've covered, whether it's selective data practices, saying which energy can and can't be used in terms of the practice, what corporations and industries can and can't use energy, things like that, and targeting Bitcoin mining around the world. But how do you all at Grid, and what do you think, going back to that responsibility piece in terms of, yes, it's a business, yes, it's profit, but also I've talked with more and more people about, man, the microscope is really on us though, as Bitcoin companies, as stewards of this new innovation. So how do you view community integration, giving back to the community, being good stewards, good neighbors as a Bitcoin company? And how do you think the industry should approach community relations as Bitcoin miners?
It's an area that I care an enormous amount about. When I think about what do I want Grid to be? What do I want to be? What example do I want to try to set as a Bitcoin miner? To me, the first foundational idea is that every mine that we build, every facility that we build, I hope it's hashing after I'm long gone. So I hope that these are going to run outside of my lifetime. And how do we do that? Is one, we develop an incredible relationship with our power company, and we get them aligned with that idea that we're thinking this long term. But two is we need to be a steward and member of our community. So one of the things we did organizationally that I think helped enormously with this is that our site manager job description includes be an active member, participant, and pillar of your community where the site is. And so I'm not going to Better Business Bureau meeting in rural Tennessee, not because I don't want to, but because I don't live there. And the site manager lives there. He is a member of that community. And I'm thinking of our first East Tennessee site in particular. He sits on the board of that business bureau, right? When there's an opportunity to sponsor, we sponsor at the highest level. It's not a big dollar figure, but it really matters to say, I'm going to be uncompromisingly at the top of that list because it matters to me. It matters to us. It's things that are as simple as we do quarterly trash pickup along the highway and at the high school. We do, we'll sponsor that. There's a golf tournament in the town, and it's like a little tiny public golf course. What do? We'll sponsor 2 foursomes, and we'll give one to the fire department and one to the sheriff's department because we want to see those guys play. And it's just showing up again and again and again. It's making the sites available for site tours and education. It's about our local high school at that site. They have a technical high school diploma that they offer. So we'll send our site manager and a repair technician and bring 2 S9s, take them apart and walk them through with all the high school students. It's making Grid and Bitcoin part of daily life in that community. The same way that you would stop at your local restaurant, you would expect to see folks from the Grid team integrated into that community just as regularly. And that's how you do it. And then, we wake up 5 years later and that relationship's really good. Making sure that the mayor knows what you're up to. If there's a job posting, post it locally first. Continuing to say you have a reason to stay in this town because there are long-term job prospects here, and Bitcoin is the reason that those exist. It's doing, it sounds, maybe it sounds silly, but it's like those little blocking and tackling things, and about showing up again and again and again and again, and just doing it right. These are small communities that want to see you show up and participate. So you know what you do? You show up and participate.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I it's unfortunate that there's so many bad news stories that really get amplified that are the minority of cases. And I think in some regards, and I've talked about this on the show before, there are certain practices and innovations that miners are making. Like, yeah, if your mining facility is noisy as hell in a super residential area or whatever, right? Like, not saying, screw you neighbors, screw you community, we're going to do what we can because this is America and we can, right? There's certain things you can do, but maybe certain things you shouldn't do, right? That's the minority of cases that I have seen in research. And I have, because I see that a lot from the left or from these Twitter accounts that barely have any followers and too many Bitcoiners are commenting on it. Stop commenting on it. You're giving them, this 1,000 follower account amplification. But, I look into that because I also want to be critical of, because we preach a lot about Bitcoin, right? I also want to be like, if they're bad actors, they should be called out, right? But they are the minority of cases. Most of the miners I've talked to are folks like yourself.
And we haven't been as quiet as I've wanted us to be in the past. And you know what we did? We invested hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into that site to bring the decibel level down. It wasn't where I wanted it to be. It wasn't what that community deserved. And so we we did the work and spent the money to fix it. And that, to me, that's the thing is like, no miner is going somewhere and saying, hey, I want to really ruin this for you. They're saying, hey, I made decisions based on a finite budget and did the best I could, and I didn't get the result I wanted the first time around. And so maybe the answer is to improve at the next site, but more importantly, these are fixable problems. Bitcoin mining is not the first industry that's made too much noise. And there's a lot of tried and true engineering and work that can be done to mitigate that and bring that down. And so, my challenge to the miners is A, pick your locations really carefully so you're not disturbing folks. And B, if you find yourself in a bit of a tricky situation with a community, make the investment and solve the problem.
Yeah. And work on it and be that community steward. Absolutely. And again, I would argue putting the Bitcoin mining industry against other titans of other industries. Come on. I mean, there isn't really a comparison in terms of community stewardship. And again, it's far from perfect, but that's the unfair comparisons. People don't make enough is think of all these other industries that have destroyed communities, decimated communities, been terrible actors. You're pinpointing Bitcoin. Come on, it's not really factual here.
I think the reason that there's so many stories like that have such legs is really on the energy piece. It's this idea that, you're coming in and you're going to suck up all our power. Whoa. Like, is that true? I think that, that to me is the, you mentioned the selective data. I think there was a magnum opus that the New York Times published that was sort of a poster child for bad data practices.
That was the one where they put like fake smog on the cover. Was that the one that came out like a year ago?
Yes. Yeah, they doctored the images to make it look like And for the record, Bitcoin miners have no exhaust, right? Take normal air in on one side, put normal air out on the other side. There's no diesel. We're not burning anything. Like it's just an outlet, right? So the emissions from a Bitcoin miner are exactly the same, not on how the energy gets generated, but on what does the actual machine produce? If you plug your phone into the wall and I plug my ASIC into our site, we're both spitting out the same amount of exhaust, which is zero.
Oh, yeah. One thing I want to make sure to close out with you on that we've talked about here, but also to get your take on this from a miner, from just being passionate about Bitcoin and seeing this thing. Now, again, the Bitcoin community, I'd say in general, and I actually joked with Troy and Margot on this in a recent episode we recorded, is that regardless, there are a variety of opinions amongst like the global Bitcoin community on something like climate change, from an outright denier of climate change, which I would not be in some of the audience, to someone who is vehemently like, oh, we need to take action now because of global temperatures and ocean temperatures, things like that. But everyone in Bitcoin is helping the environment in different ways and emissions, regardless of kind of like your ideology. That's the other beautiful thing about it. It's like we're all kind of on the same team because of how Bitcoin is naturally acting and the things that miners are pursuing. So, with that in mind, because it's less about people's ideology in this moment, it's about what's happening. Again, I'm more interested in like what's happening in these solutions here. How would you approach talking to someone about Bitcoin mining's environmental impact and actually the things that Bitcoin mining has already been seen to do and has the great potential to do going forward in terms of growing and expanding renewable energy? You mentioned something like gridless as well. Methane emission reduction, which is one of the most important things we can do in terms of global gas emissions. And then thirdly, just in terms of the emissions, again, like what it does in terms of rolling out renewable projects, tapping into nuclear as well. I know TeraWulf is doing that and others on the nuclear front. So can you talk to people about Bitcoin mining's environmental impact?
As with many tricky questions, I lean on my father's wisdom, which is, and you have to understand, I grew up in a house with, he was a CFO. So, very sort of exacting and specific,
tight,
in the best way possible. And so what he would say is, revenue heals all at the end of the day. If you want to solve any big problem, demonstrate that the solution to that problem is going to generate a lot of revenue and everybody's going to compete to solve it. And so what Bitcoin did is it created a marketplace for more efficient and lower cost energy. And we put a huge honeypot of revenue to solve, at the front of solving that problem. It's like a big prize. And I think, we've kind of ended up in this like weird local minima or maxima, maybe, where, we've done a lot of subsidies, we've done a lot of tax abatements, we've done a lot of like, big government nudging. And at the end of the day, we just needed a revenue reason to behave a certain way. And so I agree. I don't have any, and, my ideology is I want to build an incredible business and deliver incredible value to, shareholders, employees, stakeholders in the world. That's the goal. And I think if I do that, I don't have to compromise on any set of values in the path along building that business. And so, what Bitcoin does is it creates a huge incentive around efficiency in energy systems, and the development and deployment of energy systems in new places. So, hearing Eric talk last week, he and I were on a panel together, and he said, Bitcoin just fundamentally changes the financing value proposition for a hydroelectric dam in Africa. You go from 30% utilization to 100% utilization overnight. And what you're willing to build, if you're able to generate electricity at 100% utilization, is very different than what you're willing to build at 30% utilization. You're bringing a totally organic second customer to these assets that would never exist any other time. There's no customer service. There's no customer, right? All we do is work for Bitcoin, and we get paid on an algorithm rather than, hiring a bunch of sales reps to try to sell our mining to everybody. So like, my sales guys are ASICs and they hit their numbers every quarter. So it's a very, very different business proposition to an industry that basically hasn't had a diversification on the revenue side ever before. You could say, process heat, maybe liquid hydrogen or some of these other things, but those have been 20 years away for 20 years. Bitcoin's here today, ready to buy the electricity today and to deliver value globally on a knock-on effect basis today. And so, there's I forget the exact statistics on how many gigawatts are sitting waiting in the interconnection queue. All renewable developers are sitting there waiting. Bitcoin's ready to show up tomorrow. And so when you look at the math that lets you say yes or no to a project, you get a lot of no's without Bitcoin. You get a lot of yeses with Bitcoin. When you look at the existing, whether it's the existing fleet of nuclear reactors or the existing, development and deployment of hydroelectric dams, those are maybe not viable today, but without Bitcoin, but viable tomorrow with Bitcoin. And so it becomes this, there's a guy who runs Battery, Andrew Hone, and he talks about it in the debt markets where he says, you've got two metal alloys that get melted together, and when they're combined, you've got, I forget, and my chemistry professor is going to tell me I'm a bad student, but it's iron and something else, and you forge them together and you make steel. And steel is like an order of magnitude stronger than either of the inputs. And so I think you look at an electric system where you've got households and businesses, and that's kind of like two fragile groups. But then you add Bitcoin and they forge together into a steel customer base that lets that system flourish over time. The revenue incentivizes the development of, more environmentally responsible generation sources. And then the flywheel is spinning. But it's the addition, talk about the last 5 puzzle pieces. It's the addition of this new side of the demand equation that lets an economy, a community, and a generation opportunity flourish into the future. It's adding that last piece. We're seeing it happen all over the place, and we're seeing it fix historical problems to let these systems be more resilient for their existing customer base today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what's interesting and what I want people to pay attention to. So you talked about the world and energy as it is. that was one of the biggest things for me coming into Bitcoin. Learning about energy, learning about these different things is there's a lot of environmentalists and friends of mine that have the best of intentions. Hey, and let's even say some folks, some politicians that believe in extreme subsidies or a Green New Deal based on these subsidies have good intentions, right? Again, I'm not here to talk about intentions. As we're seeing some of these intentions, they don't happen to solutions, right? So let's take that at face value. A lot of these folks are just uninformed about what works. And I've talked to many people about this. Margot Piaz and I talk about this a lot together, where it's like for both of us, it was kind of this moment of like, but like the market is real and that's how our world works. You have to be a market participant. So I really wish I could take all that passion and fire from environmentalists and show them a bit about how markets work and that Bitcoin mining, at least right now, some nations are literally subsidizing it. That's a different conversation. Or buying miners and mining themselves, like Bhutan and others, which phenomenal in one regard. Kind of interesting what they might do with it. I know there's mixed reactions about El Salvador doing the same thing. That's a separate conversation. I would say in terms of mining, though, in the U.S., it is 0% subsidized. Right? If anything, they want to increase taxes on it. It's still an attacked industry, but yet it's doing more for renewable expansion. It's one of the most, if not the most, renewable industries on the planet. And again, this is all because of market incentives. So, like you said, following the money, following the revenue, someone can literally not give a damn at all about emissions and all of these other things, but they're still benefiting by investing in Bitcoin. These hydro dams, nuclear in the future, all of these things are going to carry less emissions. It's going to do better things. Methane capturing, they're going to profit off of. I mean, they used to, before Bitcoin mining, it blows my mind. They used to sell and buy like basically methane capturing machines, right? Because of these government, restrictions or local town ordinances. Now you can do that, but you can make money off doing that. So you're not just wasting, from a business perspective, money on a capture device. You buy a Bitcoin miner, which is a capture device, and you make money on the back end. First time in history that we've been able to do that. Yeah. So realizing that it's crazy.
Bitcoin turns environmental cost centers into environmental profit centers.
Absolutely.
That's the trick, right? You take a loser and you turn it into a winner because of Bitcoin. And you do it from a business perspective. And you do it not by regulation and obligation. You do it for pure greed and self-interest. And when you're able to align greed and self-interest with the side of what is right and what is just and what is prosperous, you end up in an enormously more productive world.
Yeah, and I became very comfortable with that early on in Bitcoin. Just that Trojan horse analogy is what jumped out to me first, like the Trojan horse for dictators with Bitcoin or anything like that, right? Like these human rights activists, they're going to use it. The Trojan horse for Wall Street with Bitcoin. I go back and forth with a little bit, but I'm back on the camp of, it's a brilliant Trojan horse to introduce Bitcoin and self-custody and all these things to people. Same thing with energy grids. It's this beautiful Trojan horse and showing people market incentives. And I was like, I know at the end of the day, the kind of constant is there's going to be greed in corporations and companies. As a progressive who came out of this like Occupy mindset, that's what I knew. And I don't know why my environmentalist friends or some hard left friends don't also see that. It's like they know that in one regard. You want to criticize it, but I'm like, let's take that for good rather than saying, hey, ExxonMobil, stop pumping oil. Like, what? No, they're not going to. Like, hey, government, stop being shitty. No, they're not going to. So taking these incentives and flipping it on its head is back to Bedford, is the cheat code. At least for now, for the foreseeable future. If things change, sure. But taking that is the hack that we need. We don't have time to wait for humanity. For those of us environmentalists, I think for environmentalists, we don't have time to wait. So Bitcoin is that action, and folks in the way of it that know better. It's really time to start learning about this and taking it seriously.
I totally agree. Bitcoin, I've said it before and I'll say it many, many, many times. Bitcoin demonetizes the political class and remonetizes the productive class. And that's the trick. And I put the folks who are saying, we need to just regulate ourselves into prosperity. I put them in the political class. I don't think that's a realistic position. I don't think we're going to get the world to change into the ways that we, the shape that we want it to, by force. I think we're going to change the world with incentives, and Bitcoin delivers the most powerful and globally accessible and just version of those incentives that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Well, Harry, this was a great conversation, a monster conversation. There's so much more we could talk about, but I want to be respectful of your time and our listeners that are like, Trey, gosh, shut up at this point. But is there anywhere you want to send people to, any other things that have been helpful for you, whether it's books or resources, learning about, energy, learning about Bitcoin mining that we can throw in the show notes? Where would you advise people to go to?
Come and visit us at Bitcoin Park. We're going to do another mining event in January. We've done them the last 2 years, and they've been really, really insightful, and very sort of practitioner based. So if you want to hear mining practitioners tell you about what they do, I think that's a really good setting to do that in. Obviously, check out Grid, GRIID.com. I will give you a book recommendation, but with a strong forewarning that it is not for the faint of heart, but it is truly, truly the best book about energy and the history of energy I've ever read, which is a book called Energy and Civilization by Vaclav Smil. Vaclav Smil is one of the most incredible technical writers in the world. It's very approachable. It's a brick, but nothing in there. You don't need to know anything walking into that book. He really walks you through every step of it. That's probably the book that informed my perspective the most. And then what else? I don't know. DM me on Twitter if you're curious about something. I promise to respond, but I don't promise to respond quickly.
Awesome. Yeah. The title of the book, I'm like, it's got to be at least 1,200 pages. Just that title.
Yeah. Well, and he's written like 35 books in 20 years or something. He's like prolific amount of output. But energy and civilization is like the one.
Well, I'll put that in the show notes. People go check it out. For those that are listening, that are just starting to learn on this, any episode that we do, have been on upfront about this, explore more. There's so much more to learn. This is hopefully just a snippet of someone from the from the industry talking about energy, talking about Bitcoin mining and its positive impacts, which we'll continue to do on the show. But Harry, thank you so much for coming on. This was such a pleasure. And we'll
thank you for all you do
again sometime. Yeah,
absolutely.
No
doubt. We'll do it again. I appreciate it, Trey.